Good day everyone, my name is Rechell Cinas and today I will discuss the legal aspects on tourism and hospitality chapter 5. The objectives are to describe and explain the nature of sales transaction, identify the functions and operation of agencies in the industry, and identify ways of handling credit transactions. And for our contents, we have the introduction, law on sales, characteristic of a contract of sale, effect of loss of the object in a contract of sale, sale of personal property payable in installments, then pacto de retrosale, conventional redemption, obligations of the vendor, obligation of the vendee, liability of the principal and the agent, law on credit transaction, simple loan or mutuum, pactum commissorium. Introduction. The law on sales. Contracts in the tourism, travel, and hospitality industry often involve sales agreements. These contracts outline various transactions and the remedies available in case of breach. So, operating in this industry, di jud mawa ang pag-deal sa agreements and contracts. And it is crucial to understand the ins and outs of sales transactions to navigate potential breaches effectively. So, for example, kanang na nag-iya kag boutique hotel, so ni-enter ka into a contract to purchase a batch of luxurious biddings for your suites. Now, if the supplier fails to deliver the bidding on time or delivers a subpar product, that's a breach of contract. As the buyer, you have remedies available to you. So kung sa travel agency pod, if the customer fails to pay for a booked trip or cancels at the last minute, that's a breach of contract. And of course, kay wala man sila ning tunong sa kasabutan. That is why it is important jud nga maka-understand ta in this kind of sales transactions and the remedies available to both buyers and sellers. So it is essential for smooth operations and maintaining healthy business relationships in the tourism, travel, and hospitality industry. So, the law, Article 1458. By the contract of sale, one of the contracting parties obligates himself to transfer ownership of and to deliver a determinate thing and the other to pay therefore a price certain in money or its equivalent. A contract of sale may be absolute or conditional. So the characteristic of a contract of sale, we have consensual, bilateral, principal, onerous, commutative, nominate, transmissive of ownership. So first off of a contract of sale is all about consent. It is like a mutual agreement between a buyer and a seller. So, sa naka-interesting ani is that unlike some contracts that require specific formalities, a sale contract can be as simple as a handshake or a verbal agreement. But of course, there are some exceptions like when you are dealing with big tickets items such as real estate or goods worth of a hefty sum where you gotta put it down in writing to make it legally binding. Now onto the bilateral nature of the contract, both parties have obligations. The seller gotta deliver the goods and the buyers gotta deliver cap up the cash. It is the reciprocal thing. So nakanindot is that the contract of sale is pretty independent. It's like a standalone deal. You don't need another contract to make it work. It is on its own doing its thing. Onerous aspect, so nindot siya paminawon, but it is just means that both parties are getting something out of the deal. The sellers getting paid and the buyers getting the goods. It is a fair exchange. Now, onto the commutative part, it is like what you give is what you get. The value of what's being exchanged is pretty clear cut. You pay for a product, you get the product, and then in a contract of sale, there's no need to beat around the bush. Last but not the least, we gotta talk about the ownership. So, kung mupalit ka og kanang anything, and then it is yours. You own it, kagipalit naman nimo. It is as simple as that. The seller transfers ownership to the buyer and it is theirs. So there you have it, the characteristic of a contract of sale. Next slide, we have the requisites of a contract of sale. So the consent. So consent masamta naman, but then again, it is all about both parties being on the same page. Muraga lip sync pa. The offer has to be clear and definite. And dapat sa walay pagduha-duha ang acceptance. They've gotta agree on what they're exchanging or katong dating and why they're doing it. So the cost. Now, there are certain folks nga gibawalan from entering into contracts, especially when it comes to sell. So, take for example, husband and wife try to sell their property to each other without proper procedure, then that sale is walay padulngan. Remember, ignorance with the law excuses no one. So, it is important nga makahibaw ta ani. And of course, it is not just sa spouses, guardians, agents, executors, public officers. There's a whole list of people who cannot just go around buying. Imagine na ragod gabaligya sa imong parents imong iPhone without you knowing it. Sa may bation, same goes for agents and executors. They gotta have the green light from the person they're representing. In the eyes of the law, contracts made by these disqualified individuals are a big no. It is not just a matter of fairness. It is a matter of public policy. We gotta protect people from being taken advantage of and uphold the integrity of contracts. So, yeah, consent is crucial in a contract of sale, but it is also important to know who's allowed to consent in the first place. So, we go to effect of loss of the object in a contract of sale. Article 1480, any injury to or benefit from the thing sold after the contract has been perfected from the moment of the perfection of the contract to the time of delivery shall be governed by articles 1262, Article 1262, an obligation which consists in the delivery of a determinate thing shall be extinguished if it should be lost or destroyed without the fault of the debtor and before he has incurred in delay. Article 1496, the ownership of the thing sold is acquired by the vendee from the moment it is delivered to him in any manner of the ways specified in Articles 1497 to 1501 or in any other manner signifying an agreement that the possession is transferred from the vendor to the vendee. So it is not just about the fairness, it is about upholding the integrity of contracts and safeguarding the interests of everyone involved. When certain individuals are disqualified from entering into contracts, just like I've talked about earlier, it's rooted in public policy and the need to prevent exploitation and abuse. Think of it, if there's a one person nga interested nimo could freely enter a contract on your behalf without your consent, then it could open the door of all kinds of abuse. So kinsa man pumbuanga ang musugot maito ganita guhaon sa atong manghod atong t-shirt or anything without our consent. So contract na ba noon? Even public officials dili ta mo lambo og nagsige ra sila make og deals without the society's knowing. So now by putting these restrictions, mura gatel ka nga we're all in this together and we need to ensure that everyone plays by the rules and respect each other's right. So, yeah, consent is absolutely crucial again in a contract of sale, but it is equally important to have clear guidelines. Sale of personal property payable in installments, Article 1484 in a contract of sale of personal property, the price of which is payable in installments, the vendor may exercise any of the following remedies. 1. Exact fulfillment of the obligation should the vendee fail to pay. 2. Cancel the sale should the vendee's failure to pay cover 2 or more installments. 3. Foreclose the chattel mortgage on the thing sold if one has been constituted should the vendee's failure to pay cover 2 or more installments. In this case, he shall have no further action against the purchaser to recover any unpaid balance of the price. Any agreement to the contrary shall be void. 1454 AA. Firstly, for these provisions to kick in, we're talking about a specific type of contract. It has to be a straightforward sale, not some arrangement where the seller agrees to sell eventually, or where money is lent, or even one of those deals where you buy something with the option to buy it back later. Next up, we're dealing with stuff nga madala-dala, not a land or building. So unsa man, think of a car, a piece of furniture, TV, blender and all. Now, let's talk about payment. If mupalit ka through installments, meaning you're paying it off in chunks, ginagmay over time, and there are at least 3 of these chunks, then Article 1484 is in play. But if daghan ka kwarta, barya nimo bulto, whether it is upfront or with just a one follow-up payment, then this article doesn't come into the picture. So basically, if nakay paliton, it's not land, or if it is not land or a building and you're paying for it gradually over time with at least three payments, then Article 1484 lays down some rules about what happens if you miss those payments. Double sale. Real estate developers in the hotel industry should exercise caution, particularly when dealing with properties in unexplored provinces. Understanding principles of double sale can be crucial if disputes arise over the sale of a property to multiple buyers. Article 1544, if the same thing should have been sold to different vendors, the ownership shall be transferred to the person who may have first taken possession in good faith if it should be movable property. So it is all about what happens when the same phase of property nabaligya into different people. So, labad sa ulo. Imagine, palit ka sa imong dream house only to find out nga naaday lain pang nanag-iya sa balay. Now, if we're dealing with the land that's under the Torrens title system, basically, whoever manages to get their name registered first in good faith at a local registry of deeds where the land is located gets the prize. If you're buying a land, it is crucial to get all your paperwork in order and get it registered front to avoid any nasty surprises down the line. So we have back to the retrocell conventional redemption. Article 1601, conventional redemption shall take place when the vendor reserves the right to repurchase the thing sold with the obligation to comply with the provisions of Article 1616 and other stipulations which may have been agreed upon 1507. So when we're comparing an absolute sale with a sale that includes the right to repurchase, they're pretty much the same, except for one crucial detail. In the sale with the right to repurchase, the buyer's ownership is kind of hanging in the balance until the seller will decide whether to palit or not within an agreed upon time frame. Now, if ikaw ang seller in this scenario, once you've nabaligya na nimo ang property with this right to repurchase, you cannot act like you own it again until you exercise your right to repurchase. But you can at least register the property in your name, making it clear to everyone that the buyer's ownership is temporary until you decide otherwise. On the flip side, if you're the buyer with this right to repurchase, you pretty much have control over the property right away, except if ang seller will buy it back or not. But you can still do pretty much anything an owner would do. Sell it, mortgage it, give it away in your will, you name it. Now, of course, there's a time limit in all of this. If there's walay specific agreement on how long the seller has to buy the property back, then it's a 4-year window from when the contract was signed. But if na an agreement, then it cannot stretch beyond 10 years. Obligations of the vendor. Article 1495, the vendor is bound to transfer the ownership of and deliver as well as warrant the thing which is the object of the sale. Article 1496, the ownership of the thing sold is acquired by the vendee from the moment it is delivered to him. Article 1497, the thing sold shall be understood as delivered when it is placed in the control and possession of the vendee. 1462A. So if mamaligya ka, whether it is a house or a couch, there are three main things you've gotta do. First off, you've got to actually hand over the goods to the buyer. Hatag yun na nimo. It is just about handing them over physically. It is also about making sure the buyer has the legal right to enjoy and use them. So once nahatag na nimo legally, then it is not yours na to interfere. Now, on the transferring ownership, once ma-deliver na ang goods, ownership typically shifts to the buyer. Maiya gid na as I always say, unless na ay specific conditions sa contract saying that otherwise. So even if ang buyer wala na fully paid, they still might become the official owner once naa na nila ang item or the goods. But what if kung ang buyer dili sure if they want to keep the goods? Well, in some cases, they might get them on sale or return or on approval. In these situations, ownership technically transfers to the buyer upon delivery, but mausap pa nila ilang huna-huna and give the goods back within a certain time frame or under certain conditions. Now, what if something goes wrong during delivery? In a cash on delivery COD scenario, di ba hilig magitaaning online shop? If the buyer takes on the risk as soon as the goods are delivered, but with something like a cost insurance and freight or CIF agreement, delivery is considered complete when the goods are handed over to the carrier along with all the necessary documents and insurance. However, the specifics can vary based on what's agreed upon between the buyer and seller. So lastly, there's the whole FOB thing. If you see FOB shipping point on the table, it means the seller covers the cost and risk of getting the goods to the carrier. But the buyer pays for shipping from there. In ani kasagaran paagi sa Shopee or na TikTok Shop, Lazada, din some inig-unbox din mo mag-take og video before ka mo reklamo kay sa panigurado lang. On the flip side, with FOB destination point, the seller handles transportation until the goods reach the buyer's designated spot. And if there's no specific designation, it is usually assumed that delivery happens at the seller's factory. So, whether you are buying or selling, understanding this delivery and ownership rules can save you a lot of headaches down the line. So, obligations of the vendee, Article 1582, the vendee is bound to accept delivery and pay the price of the thing sold at the time and place stipulated in a contract. So, there's a breach of a sales contract, but in a everyday language. So, if ikaw ang buyer and the seller doesn't hold up their end of the deal, maunang may mga tricks para nimo. Firstly, dili nimo ihungit ang cash unless the seller actually delivers the goods. Mao bitang di ko ganan mag-online shop niya, i-GCash kasagaran COD jud para fair. Makes sense, di ba? No delivery, no payment. If the seller does deliver but something went wrong, maybe it is damaged or lahi sa imong gi-order, you've got every right to say nga dili gyud na nako dawaton, but the problem is looy man god, sige na lang naara sa na nato, but we do have the right to do this. And if the seller's action make you worried about keeping or using the goods, like what if kuhaon ninyo balik, di hit pause payment until masort out na or klaro na jud na imuha na jud ang item. Actually, it is pretty much understandable unless wala jud kay alamag or nagbinulok lang yun. You just need to have a common sense na lang guro. Now, on the flip side, sa binali, kung sa seller side ta, mao lang gihapon, ayaw ihatag ang goods if the buyer is walay klaro. But again, fair lang. And if you are selling in installments, there are specific laws like the Rechell and the Masida laws that outline what happens if the buyer defaults on payments. Now, so whether you're ikaw ang palit or namaligya, knowing your rights and options in case of a contract breach can help you navigate sticky situation and protect your interests. Law and Agency, Article 1868. By the contract of agency, a person binds himself to render some service or to do something in representation or on behalf of another with the consent of authority of the latter 1709A. So when you're dealing with an agency relationship, it's all about one person. The agent stepping up to bat for another person. The principal or nag-defend niya ba, mura ka gahatag og yawi sa imong motor niya, lahi imong gipa-drive in your behalf. Now, what sets agency apart is that it is built on trust. Salig lang yun. Ikaw kung nidipinsahan, di, masalig lang ka. Ikaw sa nagpili sa imong driver, iyan ang decision and you just have to trust and agree with that. There are few key ingredients that make up an agency setup. So firstly, both parties have to be on the same page. Remember, the consent. Ni istorya ragud ka nga, you're my agent. Ikaw akong agent, are you just understanding that's how things are rolling? Secondly, the whole point of the agency is to do something legal. With third parties like making deals or signing contracts, it is not about doing stuff for yourself. It's about acting in someone else's interest. An agency isn't just about doing stuff. It's about making things happen on a legal level. So dili lang ni siya duwa-duwa. It is crucial whether it is creating, changing, or ending relationship with the third parties. The agent's job is to make it all go smoothly. Liability of the principal and the agent. Article 1883. If an agent acts in his own name, the principal has no right of action against the persons with whom the agent has contracted. Either have such persons against the principal. In such case, the agent is the one directly bound in favor of the person with whom he has contracted, as if the transaction were his own, except when the contract involved things below this. So when an agent is out there nakig-deal or nakig-sign contracts in their own name, dili nila need nga i-spill pa nila nga kung kinsa ilang gi-represent. They're on the hook themselves, just like they are the one making the deal. So if anything goes south or anything goes wrong, they're the one who have to deal with the consequence, not their principal. But here's the twist. If the agent goes wrong and does something beyond the scope of their authority or ignore the terms of the written authorization, they're still on the hook personally. They cannot just blame it on their loss and walk away scot-free. If tinaw na kayo nga ang agent is just acting on behalf of someone else, if they're open about who are they representing, then they can't be held personally responsible for the contract they're signing. It is like when you see a lawyer signing a contract for their client, you don't go after the lawyer. If something goes wrong, you go after the client. So when it comes to an agent liability, it all boils down to transparency and staying within the bounds of their authority. If they're upfront about who they're representing and they play by the rules, they're in the clear. But if they go off script or try to pull a fast one, they're the one who have to face the music. Law on Credit Transactions, Article 1933. By a contract of loan, one of the parties delivers to another either something not consumable so that the latter may use the same for a certain time and return it, in which case the contract is called a comodatum, or money or other consumable thing upon the condition that the same amount of the same kind and quality shall be paid, in which case the contract is simply called loan or mutuum comodatum. Is essentially gratuitous. Simple loan may be gratuitous or with a stipulation to pay interest. So starting with comodatum, mura kag nang huwam but for free. You know, like nakas imong friends sa Cebu niya, nakitulog ka kay wala kay matulgan. They're basically lending you their property. But they expect it back in the same condition. They lend it to you and they're not expecting anything in return. It is like a friendly gesture essentially. Now, mutuum on the other hand is a bit more formal. It is when someone loans you something, usually money, with the expectation nga baryan jud nimo, plus maybe a little extra for the privilege of borrowing it. Mura siya interest. So, for example, you borrow 3,000 from your neighbor and promise to pay back 3,500 in a month. That's a mutuum. And there's the concept of credit. It is like having a reputation for being trustworthy. When it comes to borrowing money, ikaw nga na maylo have confidence in your ability to pay back what you borrow. They're more willing to extend their credit to you. So if a bank offers you a credit card with 100,000 limit, it means they trust you to borrow up to that amount and pay it back responsibly. Now, when you have credit, it means you are able to borrow money up to a certain limit based on the trust and confidence that lenders have in you. So, if a bank approves you for a loan or a line of a credit, it is because they believe you'll keep your promise to pay it back. Gisaligan naka-base sad na sa sweldo nimo or kaya jud nimo. It's a bit like having a financial thumbs up from the lending world. So, simple loan or mutuum, Article 1956, no interest shall be due unless it has been expressly stipulated in writing. So, when you're borrowing money or lending it out, the interest rate is a big deal. If you and the other party agree on a specific interest rate, whether it's 5% or 15%, that's why you'll go with it. But if you nail it down a rate, the default is the legal rate, which is typically 12% per year as per the usury law. So, they have the Pactum Commissorium Article 2088. The creditor cannot appropriate the things given by way of pledge or mortgage or dispose of them. Any stipulation to the contrary is null and void. Now, the entries can only be tacked onto loan contracts whether there's collateral involved or not. If it is not a loan, you can't slap on interest. If ikaw ang naibaylo and you're late with your payments, not only mag-need kag bayad of what you have owed, but you might also have to pay for over some extra cash for the damages. This extra cash usually comes in the form of legal interest. And again, if there's no specific agreement, it's usually set as a 12% per annum. Now, if ikaw ang utangan sa interest and you have to take legal action to get it, kanang interest nag-start na nag-earn from the moment ni file kag lawsuit, even if the original contract didn't mention it. Now, there have been some changes to the legal interest rate over the years, like bumping it up to 6% to 12% per annum, as per central bank circulars number 416 and number 905. So, when you're dealing with loan contracts, whether ikaw ang namaylo or nagbabaylo, understanding how interest rate is work is a great help para dili ka masyak and make sure you're getting a free deal. Now, for the conclusion, understanding contracts and financial transaction is essential from agency relationships to loan types and pactum commissorium. We've learned to navigate complexities and protect our interests. So I think that would be all for today's discussion, and I hope all is clear, and thank you and God bless.